Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Deal. Mike Elko, Texas A&M, continuing to do really quality work in the transfer portal. Look, Dayon Hayes is not going to get the national media headlines with his commitment to Texas A&M. This one, to me, makes total sense for Texas A&M. I've really liked the work that Texas A&M has done in the transfer portal up until this point. You look at this roster and say, look, I don't have that many question marks heading into 2025, but if I did have one, it'd probably be depth on the defensive line. Specifically in that edge department where you have guys like Nick Scott and Shamar Stewart moving on to the NFL draft. There are some players that I like that we expect back on the Texas A&M roster. Guys like Cassius Howell, guys like Rylan Kennedy, who I think is going to take a massive step going into 2025. What kind of edge defender are you missing? What kind of edge defenders has Texas A&M kind of gone after? Guys like Will Hell, Jack Piber, those heavy-handed guys that are really good against the run. That's what you're getting in Dayon Hayes. Not only do you getting a guy that in 2023, when he was fully healthy, was a second-team All-ACC guy that was largely considered one of the best edge rushers in the transfer portal a cycle ago, you're getting a guy that complements players like Cassius Howell and players like Rylan Kennedy as well. Want to get into a little bit of Dayon Hayes, talk about some other targets that are emerging for Texas A&M, and kind of have the question about where does Texas A&M go from here? They've done some good work. I still think there are certain positions you want to address. Excited to get into it. Before we do it, as always, to the Texas A&M fans, it's been a blast breaking down these commitments, and the amount of support y'all continue to show to the fellas has been amazing. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, Dill. Without further ado, let's start with Dayon Hayes, who I probably like more than you do, but I'll let you kind of have the tee box here and then get into some other targets that Texas A&M is going after a little later on.
I mean, I don't think he is the top end upside, if you will, of some of the guys already on the roster. I mean, I look at what Rylan Kennedy could be, very interesting, but you need guys who will do the dirty work at the defensive end spot. Dayon Hayes does that. And to me, that's like, when you talk about roster management in today's college football game, if you will, I think you do need to be kind of cognizant of that. Like, Rylan Kennedy deserves his shot to play a lot this year. I think you want to see him on the field. I think he's deserved it. I thought he looked good in that bowl game against Oklahoma State when he got to play a fair amount. I think you got to give him his shot. I don't think Dayon Hayes is like the type of guy. It's not like they're bringing in a Rylan Kennedy 2.0 or a Cassius Howell 2.0. They're bringing in a guy who differentiates their room, rounds out their skill set, but doesn't at all push their current guys out, which I really don't.
That's the hardest part about building a roster in this modern era of college football is creating quality depth. Because if you're a guy that's not getting that much playing time, but you're a good football player, you can go to a lot of other programs and get that playing time you want. Creating quality depth has been much harder for programs like Texas A&M. That's kind of what you're getting with Dayon Hayes. And I personally think you might be selling him a little bit short in terms of the upside he can bring. Man, second-team All-ACC guy, had 29 hurries, 27 run stops in 2023 when he's fully healthy. This is a guy that if you get a healthy version, and even at Colorado last year, was very good for them in the first 4 games before he has that season-ending injury. I look at Dayon Hayes and say, not only are you getting a guy that's a proven commodity at the Power 4 level, you're also getting a guy that could be an all-conference guy if you do get the best out of him. But at the end of the day, one, you said it best, you're getting a different kind of edge defender, and it's not fun. It's not fun to talk about run stopping when you're talking about edge rushers. But it's important. If you want to get pressure on the quarterback and you want to start racking up those sacks, you better damn well make sure that you're winning on first and second down, creating those third and long situations where you can get those sacks. Dayon Hayes, to me, is a guy that allows Texas A&M to do that a little bit better. Another name that I really do like is TJ Searcy. You made a really good comp to this one, and he's going to be on campus in College Station this weekend. Scooby Williams vibes a little bit. When Scooby Williams committed to Texas A&M from Florida 12 months ago, from what we've seen from Scooby Williams at Florida, it was not great. And so you're kind of looking at it and saying, all right, maybe you're just kind of getting a depth piece at that linebacker spot. No, because a guy like Jay Bateman's a hell of a lot smarter than me. and knows Scooby Williams and says, hey, we know we can get the most out of this kid and create a starting caliber SEC linebacker. That's exactly what happened. TJ Searcy's kind of a similar story. He's played a lot of football for a younger edge rusher, right? 362 snaps in 2023. Even as a true freshman, get my years mixed up. Played 360 snaps in 2024. Played over 250 snaps as a true freshman in 2023. This is a guy that has been a proven commodity in the SEC, but there's a little bit more in the tank. Can you have a similar storyline from Scooby Williams, or that you saw with Scooby Williams, to a guy like TJ Searcy if he comes to Texas A&M?
And his upside's probably a little bit higher because you look at the physical traits. I mean, really interesting. Like big physical defensive end has shown moments of playing with a little bit more like electricity, if you will, and
physicality is the way I'd say it. Like 6'5". He came out. I remember talking about this kid coming out of high school, this kind of wiry 6'5" frame. That's like, oh, that's intriguing. You can't teach that kind of length. Didn't have that physicality that you were looking for. Quite frankly, I'm surprised he's played as much for Florida there in these first 2 years that he has. But you're going into year 3 now. That's normally when it starts to really click for guys along the line of scrimmage, specifically in the SEC. If you can get that year 3 jump from TJ Searcy, that's another guy that at the very least is giving you that quality depth addition, another heavy-handed guy that can give you some run-stopping ability. You could get a really good football player if he does take that year 3 jump as well.
Yeah, 100%. And that's, again, what you're looking for. It's just being more consistent because, again, you've seen a lot of really good moments from him. And that's been a problem, frankly, for a handful of Florida players that you've then seen go on and play good football elsewhere, like the defensive lineman from Mizzou. I thought he was like a guy you're looking at, like, when are you going to get him to play 80% of his snaps at his best instead of playing 20%? Like that type of guy, like you've seen it from some of those early Florida guys. TJ Searcy is one of those guys I look at like, man, if they can get him rolling consistently, he could be a real problem.
He's an exciting guy for me just because I remember him out of high school and saying, like, this kid could be great. We'll see if it works out. Now he's going into year 3 and has been decent for Florida the first 2 years. Demarage Lewis from Purdue. But he started his career at Indiana, goes to Purdue. This is just a depth piece. And again, these kind of players, they're not going to excite a ton of Texas A&M fans. And it's not, you're not getting an all SEC guy, but you are getting a guy that probably gives you 10 to 25 really good snaps a game. And one of the arguable flaws that you saw for Texas A&M, especially when you saw it in the fourth quarter and the back half of the season, was this team had some legit star talent on the defensive line. We all know that. But the depth was a little bit of a question mark, and you saw it sometimes break down in the fourth quarter because guys like Shamar Turner were playing so much football. Getting quality depth is going to be project number 1 on the defensive line. That's probably the biggest concern I have right now for Texas A&M going into 2025. A guy like Lewis could make you feel better about that depth, not to mention the development of guys like DJ Hicks or a guy like Dalen Evans going into 2025.
Yeah, I don't think he inherently pushes those guys out or over recruits them. Like, again, that's another issue I feel like you see with a lot of teams where, okay, maybe Dalen Evans wasn't ready last year as a true freshman. Maybe I would presume he'll be more ready to give you some reps.
Yeah, he's listed in the 2 deep for the bowl game. Look, the bowl games for me, like, I don't really give a dang if Texas A&M wins or loses it, but I want to see some of those young kids. Yeah, that's why I it's a hot take of mine. I'm kind of a fan of the opt-outs. If you're a dude, like, go to the NFL. I'm a Michigan fan and we're playing Alabama in the bowl game, I don't really care about the score that much. I want them to play some of the young cats so we can get a sense of where they are at with their development. That's, for me, if I'm a Texas A&M fan, that's what I'm looking for. Like, what does Evans look like? What does Hicks look like? What are these guys going to be dudes for us in 2025? Going to the right tackle spot, Dale, or just the tackle spot in general. From what it sounds like, Trey Zune will be back. You get Reed Adams back. So you're starting to feel better about the offensive line going into 2025. That right tackle spot was a problem. You could never really – you work some guys in, Crown over Reuben Father. It just never was a great position. This kid could come in and just, in my opinion, plug and play dude. And what I love most about Ethan here is at Rice still, he's been starting for the last 3 years. The first 2 years were bad. Like, and not that I went back and watched him in 2023 and 2024. In 2022, it was 45 quarterback pressures according to PFF. Like those grades were just straight up in the red. And then in 2023, it gets a little bit better, but it still was not great. Then he moves over to the left tackle spot in 2024 and has a phenomenal season. Gave up only 1 sack, only 12 quarterback pressures. I think he'll be better on the right side because he's a big dog. This to me would thoroughly answer the question at right tackle for me heading into 2025.
Yeah, because I don't think you'd feel particularly comfortable at all moving forward with those two again. I just think the consistency last year wasn't close to where it needed to be, especially in the pass protection game. And again, I think if I'm Texas A&M, I think you probably want to see continued development with Marcel Reed in terms of his ability to throw from the pocket. If that's going to happen, you need your guys to be able to pass protect a little bit better. And that right tackle position, especially, felt extraordinarily leaky. So that to me, honestly, probably like question number one. Because I don't even know that right now they have that young guy who I think you're looking to be that guy. Like, again, defensive line, like you certainly have elements of questions, but you have some really good players. You have a bunch of good players coming from the 24 class. This right tackle spot, I don't really see the light on the at all on this roster.
Yeah, you just have a question mark about who can be that guy to come in and play. Like in my opinion, you're going to have those guys. I mean, there's a reason Mike Elko signed 7 offensive linemen in the 2025 high school recruiting class. He knows how to build an offensive line. You don't build it in the transfer portal. You build it on the high school recruiting trail to kind of bridge that gap between the Lamont Rogers and company coming in. This kid, I think, would do a really good job at right tackle. The wide receiver position. So Emmanuel Henderson from Bama, who's a guy that's like, I feel like every time I watch him play, I get kind of intrigued. But there's also probably a reason he hasn't played a ton during his college football career. Was a running back prospect coming out of high school, makes the transition to wide receiver. I think he's talented. I don't know if he's the immediate answer. I guess what I'm going to ask you is, you look at the Texas A&M wide receiver room, Isaiah Horton and Casey Concepcion are probably those guys that if they want to come, you take them. Like I look at the wide receiver and you say, okay, you add Micah Hudson, you add Mario Craver, you have Jerome Miles coming in, Terry Bussey's going into year 2. I think it's going to be much better than it was in 2024. That's no question. I think the question is, do we spend our time and resources continuing to try to get it better, or do we focus on some of the other positions, the defensive line, the right tackle spot, and make sure we're addressing arguably some bigger holes on our roster?
And you said it. That to me, it's really, if you can go get an Isaiah Horton or a Casey Concepcion, those type of guys who
you don't say no.
Like, nobody says no. It doesn't matter how good you think your wideout room is.
Agreed.
Ohio State says yes to those two guys. But like, I don't think I'm with you. I just don't see why at this point in the cycle it'd be priority one, because I think you added enough talent. Now it's like, again, if that room can't make it happen, then you probably got to look elsewhere in terms of what's the problem. Because at this point, I think there's enough good players. I thought Noah Thomas needed to emerge. You got a bunch of really good young players coming in. You brought a couple transfers in, one in Craver who played really well as a freshman at Mississippi State. I think the talent in the room is certainly there. If it doesn't produce, then you got to look somewhere else, because it can't just be about bringing in new talent when, I mean, that's a pretty good room at this point.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at it goes back to that like roster construction conversation that I love. And Lincoln Riley, I thought in one of his post-practice interviews, had a really nice, transparent conversation. And it's like, it's essentially a little bit of a salary cap. Like, you have these resources, then you use those resources to create the best football team that you can. Does bringing in a guy like Isaiah Horton versus maybe bringing in a guy like Ethan at the right tackle spot and another couple pieces on the defensive line, what makes your roster better heading into 2025? My take would be addressing the depth on the defensive line, making sure you got a right tackle you trust. That's probably where I'm coming from. This is not me saying I'm going to be fired up if Casey Concepcion or Isaiah Horton commit to Texas A&M. There's no question about it. Is that the way to does that give you the best roster possible in 2025? That's kind of what we're getting at. we'll close it down there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.